brings us to a soft close. I'm going to bring us to the opening of our 2021 fellowship application webinar. It is a pleasure to have everyone here. To give you a little bit more about myself, hello, my name is Caroline. My pronouns are she and her, and I am Camelback's manager of our search and align activities. So that's everything that happens prior to the fellowship, from the outreach, the recruitment, to you all, to our entrepreneurial applicant pool, all the way through our due diligence and selections to find our final fellow class. I've been with Camelback for about a year and a half now, and I joined with a real passion for entrepreneurship and an admiration for the place that Camelback sat at the intersection between entrepreneurship, economic development, and anti-racism. Particularly in a city that I care so much about, which is New Orleans, where we're headquartered, although we work with entrepreneurs from across the country. This is where I graduated from school and just admire doing the work alongside the folks in our ecosystem, but most importantly, the Camelback team every day. One of my favorite parts of the job, as maybe I've mentioned as y'all are coming in, is getting to speak to entrepreneurs. Y'all give me so much life and inspiration, particularly the folks that we're seeing in underrepresented backgrounds in education and technology. It's really your stories that give me the motivation and the inspiration to do the work that I do. And you may be asking, what is that work? And so you'll see here just a real rough agenda of what we'll be going over today. I'll give you a little bit more of a story about Camelback. We think that the why of this work is super important, so hoping to answer that for you. And then I'll go into an overview of our fellowship. There have been some changes to our 2021 program delivery, and so I'll be previewing that for you. And then we'll move into our application overview, including both the technical and then more theoretical approaches to completing our application, including some fresh tips for y'all in order to press that submit button. And then lastly, I'll reserve some time at the end for Q&A. You should see the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. That'll be open during the course of our entire webinar. So feel free to drop your questions there. That's the best place for me to be able to reference it once we move into Q&A time towards the end. I'll try to keep up with the chat, but there's lots of folks here, lots of excitement. Feel free to still be throwing things out there. But like I said, I'll be referring to the Q&A questions at the end to answer anything y'all may have. And I'll give out my contact information as well if there's any lingering questions or concerns after our time together concludes. All right, I hope we're feeling good. This is one of my favorite parts of the presentation, which is our why, which is Camelback's story. So our founder and CEO, Aaron Walker, founded Camelback Ventures in 2013, starting with a self-funded pilot to support entrepreneurs of color from his apartment in Brooklyn. And that pilot was grounded in the belief that you see here, that genius is equally distributed, but access is not. Throughout the past 7 or 8 years, Aaron and our ever-growing team established Camelback as an emerging leader in the education entrepreneurial support organization space. We started with the education sector as a starting point, just that, but certainly not an ending point. To get a foothold on addressing the racial, social, and economic disparities we know entrepreneurship can help us solve. You'll see in a few slides how we've intentionally expanded our scope to explore more industries that can ultimately get us to our mission of increasing individual and community education, as well as generational wealth to create more livable communities. So over 6 fellowship cycles, we have now accumulated over 85 fantastic alumni who represent our Camelback fam. And you'll hear me say this again, but I think the best people to share Camelback's story is those alumni who we affectionately call the #CamelbackFam. And I'm hoping that to energize us all, I can present to you their rendition of our Ruthless Manifesto, which is a message that we have for you all, for the world, that we're expressing with urgency and intensity about the necessity to create an equitable and just world. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and press play.
Yes, be ruthless. When there are difficult decisions to be made, commit.
Learn to be okay with being wrong.
Be willing to die for something.
it's going to happen anyway.
So make death pay a worthy ransom.
Focus on the task at hand.
Then engage in self-care.
Give freely when required. Be uncharitable with your energy. You must prioritize your North Stars.
Look people in the eye when they do not expect you to.
Get shit done.
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 Really well.
And when you do, own it.
Ruthlessness is only destructive by choice.
You can be ruthless for good.
Be ruthless because dignity has no minimum wage.
Be ruthless for the writing of liberated books that can liberate all minds.
Be ruthless to create a society that is not afraid of anybody.
Be ruthless because genius is equally distributed,
but opportunity is not.
Be ruthless for our children who depend on the adults to get it right.
Be ruthless because time is your most precious, non-renewable resource.
At this very moment, you are alive.
At this very moment.
You are alive.
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 You are alive. You've got this.
You got this.
And you got this.
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 Mwah. Love you. See you soon.
All right, I am loving the hype for the video in the chat box. Thank you so much. Glad that that resonated with y'all because that idea, being ruthless for good, is really what drives us at Camelback. We believe that it is always time to be ruthless for good. It's a theme that we hope will resonate with you as you complete the application because after all, it's really just about you telling us what you're ruthless for.
Yes. Be.
All right. So do you want to know more about those lovely faces that you just saw boldly proclaiming our Ruthless Manifesto? Why, there are alumni, of course. We've worked with well over 80 entrepreneurs across the country in education and the tech sectors. 55% of them identify as women and 90% identify as people of color. Like our founder, Erin, many identify as first in their family to go to college and or as immigrants or children of immigrants. After the fellowship, we've seen those alumni go on to raise well over $26 million. This is actually a little bit of an outdated number, so it's even more than that, and gain the support from some renowned institutions and strategic partners. In doing a comparative analysis of our entrepreneurs, our alumni, and their mostly white and male peers, we found that unfortunately they were receiving less funding, but that being said, they were going further faster with the funding that they did receive. This is a little bit of a side note, but I think it's an important part about Camelback, is that this realization actually inspired one of our newest programs called Capital Collaborative, which works with mid to senior level white leaders from grant-making foundations and corporations across the US to call on them to critically examine and deepen their and their organization's commitment to racial equity. So we're hoping through this program that they're able to form more thoughtful and action-oriented steps in order to diversify their networks and make their grant making accessible for more entrepreneurs of color. So we see our work in the fellowship and Capital Collaborative really working in tandem in order to solve these funding disparities and continue to drive more funding to BIPOC founders. For more on our alumni, go ahead and check out camelbackventures.org/fellows. I really recommend that before you submit your application, that you check out at least a few of the fellow profiles to get a sense for the quality and drive of our alumni and the game-changing work that their ventures are doing in their communities. All right, so as I mentioned, before I get to the application itself, I'm actually going to review what Camelback is ruthlessly committed to providing for our fellows. We're a rigorous early stage accelerator for entrepreneurs of color, women, and non-binary founders. And we're anchoring our offerings in our 5 C's: coaching, capital, connections, community, and curriculum. I know that's a lot. We love alliteration, but it truly does really capture what we're able to provide during the fellowship programming. These things have been true of our programming for the past 6 fellowship cycles and will be true into the future. That being said, we're also switching things up a little bit this year because we'd love to keep it fresh at Camelback, especially in light of the lessons that we learned in 2020 and the changing needs of our fellows. We've made some strategic decisions on how we're delivering these 5 Cs in order to better suit our fellows. As with much of Camelback's work, we're in the pursuit of continuous evolution, so things may be subject to change, and we appreciate both your grace and your feedback in sharing how we're doing throughout these changes. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time breaking down what each one of these Cs looks like and how it plays out in our programming, as well as some hot off the press changes for the 2021 fellowship cycle. This is really the first time that we're previewing externally, so I'm excited to hear everyone's thoughts. So whenever you hear me say like in 2021, just that's like a clue that there's some kind of switch or update. So it may be something that you are less familiar with if you've applied to Camelback in the past or spoken to our alumni. Loving the excitement. All right, so to start off, this is actually a change that we officially unveiled last year. So it's the second year that we're offering differentiated programming underneath 2 tracks, education and conscious tech. We're looking for between 4 to 6 entrepreneurs in each track for a total of 8 to 12 entrepreneurs that we're going to support in 2021. These tracks will run mostly independently in that we're tailoring the resources, the coaching, and the expertise to the needs of the specific sector and hosting distinct programming. We believe this offers a more differentiated support in a real intimate kind of small group environment. But that being said, there will be intentional time carved out in order for the fellows in the education track to get to know the fellows in the conscious tech track and do that kind of cross-track community and networking. So a little bit more on what these tracks mean. We know that some folks may have a little bit of anxiety when it comes to answering the question on their application about which track their venture falls under. So the education track is what most folks are familiar with when it comes to Camelback's work. This includes venture models that can be nonprofits, for-profits, hybrids, and charter schools, as well as all other alternative schooling models. Many of these folks are supporting primary beneficiaries such as teachers, students, and school administrators. We also welcome ventures that are doing more education adjacent work, whereby their product or service meets the needs of community, adult, and youth learning in environments that are beyond just the classroom. So it's actually in seeing the creativity of those education adjacent ventures over the first few fellowship cycles that we were inspired to explicitly call out an entirely separate track and dedicating time, resources, and energy into what we call the conscious technology sector. It's inspired by folks like 2018 fellow Brandon Anderson, who's the founder of Rahim, which is an independent service for reporting police in the US, and they're working to end police terror against Black people. They help people report police and connect to resources for justice and healing, as well as provide data and insights for policy changes. Our 2020 fellow Julio Rivera founded Liberate Meditation, which is a subscription-based meditation app that includes practices and talks designed for the Black community. It is available to download on the App Store. Highly recommend you download it. Again, it's called Liberate Meditation. So that's a little bit of a sample of who our conscious tech folks are. They represent companies that are leveraging tech as a tool for social good, namely to pursue justice for communities of color. They can fall into industries such as workforce development, health and wellness, financial literacy, and climate tech. So as I mentioned, on the application, you will be asked to select which track your venture falls under. If you're having a hard time selecting just one, I recommend you take a look at our previous fellows, again at camelbackventures.org/fellows, to get an idea of who we funded in the past and which venture profile most mirrors your own. Your response to that question isn't set in stone. It doesn't have to be binding. It can be changed after we review and converse about your application and really get to know you better. I'm also happy to answer more specific questions on this topic as we conclude the webinar in the Q&A portion. All right, so once you're sorted into a track, then you're able to really reap the rewards of our fellowship program offerings. So let's go ahead and get into it. Cornerstone of Camelback's fellowship has been and always will be coaching. And so even, that's as evidenced by our fellow feedback. When asked about the most compelling parts of his experience, 2020 fellow Julio, who I mentioned earlier, said that the coaching really supported me and helped me to see where I can make the most impact. The bond that he and his coach, growth strategist Lisa Atia, formed over the fellowship was truly meaningful and so beautiful to see from the outside really blossom and accelerate his venture. It's meant to allow for a degree of insight and differentiated support that is really unparalleled to most other relationships and stakeholders that you have when starting your venture. In 2021, we are doubling down on the importance of mentorship by not only pairing fellows with a one-on-one startup coach, but also a track designated lead who is a member of the Camelback team. So there is a senior lead of the conscious tech track and a senior lead of the education track. And they have industry-specific knowledge as well as full access to Camelback's resources in order to support you and your track cohort from fellowship through alumnihood. All right, next one is one of the most critical, which is capital. And that may be why some of y'all are here today. I touched on the funding disparities earlier for BIPOC founders, and it's important to say that Camelback is committed to putting our own money where our mouth is when it comes to our definition of racial and gender equity in entrepreneurship. And that means giving out the money. So for any fellow who comes through our program, we offer up to 40K in capital. For many fellows, we may be the first money in, which is why we call ourselves a friends and family round. We firmly believe in the importance of unrestricted capital at the earliest stages, such that you, the founder, can decide what's best to grow your venture. For nonprofits and schools, this 40K is offered through a grant. And for for-profits and hybrids, the funds come through a convertible note with some gracious terms for our founders. So it's important to us that while we are helping you develop your venture, we're also helping you develop your relationships in your market and field. The Camelback fam extends well beyond just our fellows and alumni to include a network of stakeholders, investors, funders, and experts who can support you in catalyzing your venture. The introductions we provide come in a variety of different forms. So sometimes we'll host practice pitch sessions with you and a real investor, or offer live demos for you in front of a virtual audience. Overall, we have a pretty strong network of strategic partners who are really eager to support our fellows in education and technology. All right, this one, the 4th C community, is my favorite to speak to. Because it is something we take really seriously while also having a lot of fun with. We don't use the term family lightly. Of all the resources Camelback provides, we hear time and time again that the ongoing connections within our alumni network are the most valuable. We've seen alumni support one another as customers, board members, strategic partners, and really perhaps most impactfully, lifelong supporters. We know that Camelback is sometimes the first time our fellows are in an entrepreneurial space with folks that look like them with the aligned values and compatible perspectives. These relationships will really always come first. We treat one another like family, and this means that you'll always be a part of the Camelback fam, even beyond your time with the fellowship. In 2021, we are committing to investing more into the alumni experience for all fellows who go through our programming. This includes ongoing advising with a dedicated member of the Camelback team holding these relationships, potential follow-on funding opportunities, regular touch points with alumni community leaders, and frequent community and professional development events to engage the network. All right, and last but not least, we've packaged this all together in a curriculum that is rooted in 5 core competencies. We've developed this curriculum over so many years of working with entrepreneurs while keeping in mind the specific needs of underrepresented founders. Like I said, the curriculum stands on the 5 pillars of core competencies that I'll outline in the next slide. This is a big change for 2021, so definitely clue in for this. We are revamping our curriculum delivery strategy. Namely, we are shifting away from the time-consuming, travel-intensive in-person facilitations from years past, and instead moving towards highly personalized, engaging virtual workshops and guidance offered through an online learning platform. This will give our fellows full access to individualized support catered to the needs of their venture, including high-touch opportunities for feedback from coaches and experts throughout their coursework. Each fellow and their coaching team will develop a venture success map to develop their venture over the fellowship. This mapping process will ensure that the content covered during the online course really addresses the specific fellow needs and their development. Naturally, more time will be spent on some competencies than the others, so we may not make our way through all 5 during the fellowship, which is why we are offering ongoing alumni support. These decisions are weighed carefully by Camelback team members using what we know about the cohort, the skills and knowledge of the fellows, the ventures you're working on, as well as our research and best practices by other accelerators and development programs. All of this comes with a fine lens towards personal leadership development, because it's really important that not only are we growing your venture, but we're also growing you as a leader throughout the curriculum. So if you follow Camelback's programming for the past few years or have spoken to an alumni about their experience in the fellowship, it's important to note that what 2021 holds and beyond will look and feel different. This means no more week-long in-person summits or big long days with a big group held on Zoom. When it's safe to do so, we do plan on gathering in-person ways, but more so for the purposes of community building and networking, because we also believe that time is really valuable. We think that this change away from the regimented in-person facilitations reflects a kinder respect to the fellows, hopefully your time and travel schedules. And it also allows for more genuine relationship building that we know is really important to our community. So here are our 5 core competencies that our curriculum touches on. On our website, we actually have a blog post that goes more in depth about each one of these offers. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And if you want to give a little drum roll, I'm going to give you my first application tip of the day. It's to go read that blog post and pull out specific core competencies that you think your venture is in need of development on. Because if you're able to name those during your application, it'll help our team gain more clarity and understanding in how we can help you accelerate your venture. When it comes to the application, don't hold back when sharing with us potential areas for growth, because we want to know that there is value that we can provide to you. To give you an idea of what these competencies mean, hiring and managing teams is all about purposefully building a diverse, effective team with varied experiences. Pitch ready is the idea that an entrepreneur is always ready to communicate their story in a compelling way to anyone, not only in a strict pitch day virtual demo setup. We also know the importance of helping fellows develop their stakeholder management strategy so that they can know who should be in their network and how to get them there. As far as project and budget management, we're helping fellows establish good habits with respect to setting and achieving goals. And then be strategic refers to a general understanding of user needs informed by engagement with a variety of users as well as the market. I know that perhaps was a lot of jargon, a lot of words that I threw out there, but to really ground how important our curriculum is, I just want to highlight this testimony from our 2017 fellow, Tony Weber. And he said, a lot of programs give you money and then disappear. Camelback's different. The curriculum taught me how to actually run a successful startup. Design sprints helped me prioritize and develop our new product, and workshops on hiring and managing talent helped me figure out who I needed to hire and how to be a better leader. And that's really what we're in the name of supporting better leaders. All right, I know that was a lot of information. So and you may be asking yourself, you're in, now when do I start? So we anticipate kicking off our education track of the fellowship for 2021 in mid-July and running through the end of October. The Conscious Tech track will start in August and wrap up by the Thanksgiving holiday. Each track runs for about 13 weeks, which is a slightly condensed timeline compared to years past. We also know that in condensing this, we're actually getting more bang for our buck because we're pivoting our curriculum delivery model to the online platform and honing in on more differentiated support. We expect fellows to dedicate between 8 and 10 hours a week over the course of 13 weeks on fellowship activities. This will include synchronous virtual learning opportunities, asynchronous independent work time, and one-on-one coaching calls. So you'll see that our 2 tracks are distinct separate programs with different timelines, but there's also plenty of overlap in between. So that's when we'll be offering the network and community building opportunities during those weeks. All right, so moving away from fellowship timeline to application timeline. before I hop in there, I love that folks are submitting questions through Q&A. Please continue to do that. Would love to follow up, refer to those in our Q&A time that we'll be moving into shortly. But to touch on the application timeline, we opened our application on March 1st and have our priority deadline coming up in just 1 week on April 1st at 10 p.m. Central. We highly, highly cannot stress, highly recommend you apply by the priority deadline. It's just 1 week away. We anticipate that the application takes anywhere between 2 and 5 hours to complete. And should you get it in by April 1st, you get the added benefit of having your application being reviewed by our team with fresh eyes and some spirit and enthusiasm at the beginning of this pretty long process. Additionally, you'll hear back on your finalist status by the end of the month, including early access to scheduling an interview should you be selected as a finalist. Our final application deadline is April 23rd at 10 p.m. Central. Should you apply by this time, we anticipate offering you a status update to all candidates by May 10th. About 15% of the applicant pool will then be selected as finalists and invited to a final round interview conducted between May 17th and June 4th. After those conclude, our Camelback team, as well as a community review board, will come together to make some really hard, I can't stress enough, really tough decisions about who to select for our 2021 fellow class. And we'll make that announcement by June 24th. Okay, so here's a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the process behind the application. So in addition to my recommendation to apply by our priority deadline of April 1st, my next most important advice to you all is to download the application toolkit at camelbackventures.org/apply if you have not already, because that document has all this information and more. It includes, probably most importantly, the texts and prompts for all the questions that appear on round 1 of the application. Before we released the application, we took a really hard look at the data we were collecting from applicants over the past few years and made some pretty serious dramatic cuts to the volume of questions on our application and therefore the burden of explanation on your part. So to that end, we condensed what used to be several rounds of an application process into just one form that has a mix of short answer, multiple choice, long form, and video question responses. These questions essentially have you construct your business plan for us, including your pitch, your target market, and your growth strategy. It's important to note that we actually evaluate your application on aspects to do with your venture, as well as the strengths you exhibit as a founder and potential fellow, and the potential impact Camelback can have on your growth. That's all to say that we want to hear your story for that to shine through. It's one of the reasons that we've kept the video responses in the application. We wanted to ensure that we're incorporating more modalities for a fellow or potential fellow to really showcase who they are, regardless of what their educational background or skill set is. And it's a step in moving away from the power of the written word. So from the round 1 application, like I mentioned, if you are selected as a finalist, you'll be invited to our final round, which is a 75-minute interview with a member of the Camelback team, an alumni, and 1 or 2 industry experts who have knowledge in your target market. And all that information will then be collected and assessed by us in the community in order to reach our final decisions. Here's just a quick primer on some of the technical suggestions we have when completing the application. We worked pretty hard to find a platform that is relatively intuitive and user-friendly, but of course, there's always some things that arise. Like I mentioned before, the biggest thing you can do to prevent technical difficulties or user error is to draft your responses ahead of time before even opening up the application portal by copying and pasting the questions that are in the application kit into like a Google Doc or a Word doc, highlighting your responses to multiple choice questions, drafting out your longer form questions, having that all finalized in draft form before you begin to copy and paste into the application portal itself, which can be found at camelbackventures.org/2021 app. Make sure you have an eye for which questions are required. Also know that you have the option to save your progress and return later to the application by using a feature at the bottom of the application portal. It's a little icon that you press on to click save and complete later. You'll have to sign up with a username and password to the platform service called JotForm, and they will send you an email that then you'll access with a link to take you back to your application in order to complete it. You'll also have the opportunity to review all of your responses before officially clicking the submit button, because once it's submitted, unfortunately, you are not able to edit. As far as the video submissions go, my same recommendation applies to have those drafted and recorded ahead of time before you even start on the application portal. You can record these videos on any device, whether it be a laptop, a computer, desktop, or a phone, and save it as a file to your computer. You might want to do a couple different rounds of revisions or rehearsals. It doesn't have to be perfect on the first go. Feel free to record as many times as you'd like. And then when you go to actually complete the application portal, you'll be prompted to upload it when the video questions are asked. You can also record the video in the application portal, but it gets a little glitchy there. And I've had some people lose their recordings when they record in the application portal, which of course we don't want to happen. So again, it's best to record like on your computer, separate from the application portal, and then upload later. If you have any more questions about that, I'm happy to answer that. And really, when it comes to the videos, we don't care about the technical quality. We just want to see you as you show up as your authentic self. So it's not a test of your video production skills. Don't be adding any special effects or words on the screen or slides. Really, we're just looking to hear from you. We're also striving to offer more accessibility options, particularly for those who have disabilities. And so if you would benefit from completing an application in a single form, as opposed to each question coming up one by one, or if you'd like to explore other alternatives, such as completing your application by phone, please go ahead and reach out to me at my email, which is caroline@camelbackventures.org, which I'll also show at the end of our presentation. Okay, so I know that I just talked to y'all for quite some time. I'm going to take a deep breath. Feel free to do the same. But as we are in the home stretch of all the information that I'm hoping to share for y'all, I just want to thank you for bearing with me. And as another sign of our appreciation, I'm happy to share some of our tried and true recommendations for completing a strong application. And the first is be specific. So feel free to drop organizations, partners, customers that you're working with, but also make sure you're describing in detail the why you want to work or why you are working with those people and how they're going to specifically advance your work. The same is true for Camelback. When we ask you, why do you want to be a fellow? We really want you to get as specific and detailed in that response as possible. Second is to balance data with stories. It's great if you can give us the quantitative analysis of your target total addressable market, but we also want to know why that is your target market and what you've done to get to know that market. So share data on why your work exists, as well as an anecdote for why this work is personal for you. I'll say that I mentioned earlier that we assess applications not only based off of the strengths of the venture, but also the strengths of the fellow. And some of those characteristics that we're looking for are resilience and proximity to the community of which they're serving. And so that can all come out through storytelling. And then lastly, we want you to share your wins, but also share your struggles. We want to know that you're ready to grow. If you're applying to Camelback and you have absolutely no needs and you are on a hockey stick trajectory towards unicorn status, there's probably not much that we can do for you. Whereas if you're really cognizant and aware of what your venture needs in order to grow, that's going to be the best value that we can provide for you. So feel free to share really what those areas of development are. Don't hold them back, just name them. And then here's just a little bit of an extra note on stage of venture, because this tends to be a little bit of point of ambiguity with Camelback's criteria. We say that we are an early stage funder, but early stage can be defined in a million different ways. We've had folks who started only in the few months before starting the fellowship, but we've also had folks who had been in business for years before joining the fellowship. And so what we're really looking for in order for folks to be primed for our 5 C's that we're offering in the fellowship is that you have some form of a beta or a pilot, a minimum viable product, some version of your product or service that is being tested by your community. Because that customer and community feedback is really important for us to see on your application. That's another tip for y'all. If you have ever done any kind of market testing, community feedback, focus groups, surveys, we want to know that you're really getting to know the folks that you're serving, your customers, your community, and that you're tailoring the needs and the features of your organization, of your venture, to what you're hearing from those people. And that also goes with saying, we want you to know your target market. It doesn't mean that you have already captured your target market, but that you have a really good understanding of what those needs are, what the size is, who the competitive landscape is. Because while Camelback has a depth of knowledge in the conscious tech and the education sectors, we can't know every single sector that falls underneath that. And so we look to you to kind of be the expert of your own target market. And then lastly, we're looking for you to have some understanding of what scale means to you. Sometimes scale means that you're looking to grow to be a nationally recognized brand that has customers across the 50 states. And that's great. You can go ahead and mention how you want to scale by broadening your regional or national reach. But sometimes scale also just means really deepening what your local impact is. This is particularly applicable for our schools and our nonprofit organizations who are focused on doing really great work in their backyards, but being able to expand perhaps the folks that they're serving or the services that they provide. Again, we just want you to be able to name with some kind of clarity of what that growth strategy, what that scale strategy looks like. So these are the next steps for you all. I hope that after me talking for 40 minutes that you're like, I am in, where do I hit submit? And this is the kind of hard facts of how you do that. If you're still evaluating whether Camelback is a good fit for you, we do offer this alignment quiz that can be found on our apply page that will give you a recommendation of whether you should apply, hold off, or maybe wait for next year. After that, if you're ready to take on the application, you can download the application kit on that same page. Again, draft your answers and video responses offline so that you're ready to just upload it all into the application portal at once without losing any of your work. And that application portal is found at camelbackventures.org/2021 app. All right, that was a lot. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I am going to take a moment to drink some water and then also look at the Q&A to see what questions I can address from you all. Also, if you have to hop off for any reason, do know that I am available to you all. You can reach me at caroline@camelbackventures.org if a question that you have has not been addressed or won't be addressed in the Q&A. All right, so I see. Can you clarify the questions in the finance question about documents regarding business model? Could this be a budget? Yeah, great question. Throughout the round 1 application, there are 2 opportunities for you to upload auxiliary documents. One is a pitch deck, and that is required. And just feel free to just upload a general pitch deck that you use for any use. It doesn't have to be tailored to the Camelback application, but that is required. And then in the financial resources section, we give you the opportunity, it's an optional question, to upload any documents that help us get an idea of your financial and revenue status. So most namely that is probably a budget. It could be a P&L, it could be a projected budget for the next year. It could be your pricing for your product or your service. It again doesn't have to be anything that you're like creating out of the blue or just for the purposes of the application, but perhaps something that you already offer in your sales pipeline, or that's something that you like pull from your accountant once a month. All of that is kept confidential and won't be shared with anyone, but just gives us a handle on what your pricing model looks like. All right. Okay, so I'm seeing questions about more about stage. So how new a venture do you need to be for consideration? And then is there a limit for how old you are? What if you've pivoted your ideas recently? Yeah, so like I said, we really are pretty flexible with our definition of early stage. The only folks that we think that we're probably not best suited to support are purely idea stage, who don't have any customer testing or a version of their product or service out there yet. But as long as you fit that barrier for entry and again are like in your community receiving feedback and pivoting to it, I'd say to go ahead and apply. There is no like cap on, how old you are, although really core to Camelback's criteria for supporting entrepreneurs is that we're reaching undiscovered founders. And so those are folks who maybe have not been resourced by the same fellowship programs, accelerators, fundraising opportunities that we see the same folks go through. And so there's times when we define folks as a little bit too late stage for the sweet spot that Camelback sits in, because perhaps they've already been resourced to a place that they've been able to experience the growth that some folks have been locked out of. All right, I see if you've already submitted your application and didn't include the nuggets from today's webinar, will points be deducted? No, not at all. I mean, we holistically review all the applications, again, on the characteristics represented from the fellow, the venture, and our ability to impact your growth as Camelback. And I have a firm, firm confidence that everyone is able to do that, whether or not they got these little tips here. These are just little things that I've seen after doing this process for 2 years. I see some questions about how many times you can apply or if you've applied previously. So you can apply year over year. This kind of gets into another change for 2022. Definitely really hot off the press, but we're actually looking to increase the number of times with which you can apply in a given year, so the entry points. As of 2021, this is the only time we're opening up the application, but that'll look different in 2022, which is to say that you can apply multiple times in a year, and that we're looking to really codify a system whereby we can save your application and then share it with you if you choose to apply again, so you don't need to like redo all of those answers. That process is unfortunately not in place right now. If you have applied previously and you're looking for a copy of those responses, I might be able to help you. I can't make any guarantees because our data is a little bit all over the place, but if you're interested in accessing that, go ahead and email me at the email on the screen, and I can see if I can get you your responses from years past. So I see a question about how many folks does the program support. So again, we look to have each track be comprised of about 4 to 6 fellows, so supporting 12 fellows overall in 2021. But as I was mentioning about our 2022 cycles, with us hosting more application periods, we'll also be hosting more fellowship programming. And so we're really looking to amplify the number of folks that we can support come 2022 and beyond. Oh, I see a question in the chat about if there's any video examples of pitches. There are, which can be found on our web or on our YouTube page. We have published previous virtual pitch events that we posted that we call Ruthless Pitches. If you want access, if you can't find them on our YouTube page, feel free to reach out to me and I can go ahead and send you the links to some of our fellow pitches of years past. Let's see. As far as example pitch decks that we recommend, really, I mean, it's such a cornerstone for our pitch readiness competency for us to work really rigorously on your pitch deck and the pitch that goes along with it. So we just want to know that you have something that you've worked on a pitch before. There are little expectations on what exactly that looks like. And in fact, we appreciate the creativity and flexibility that folks are able to show us. That really kind of expands our understanding understanding of what a traditional pitch deck looks like. So we don't provide just one template or way to do that. I know that if you Google example pitch deck template, you're going to get 100. I say just choose one that feels right for you. I see a question here about adding things to your application. Go ahead and email me at the email you see on the screen, and I would love to follow up one-on-one with you about that. I feel like I'm like rapid fire working my way through these questions. I'm sorry if I missed them. I'm trying to capture them all. So yeah, you can apply again, even if you were not accepted in years past. Some of the fellows that I have enjoyed seeing their growth through the fellowship the most are folks that have applied one or more times and just really get a lot out of the experience after, really understanding and refining their business model throughout the years until eventually it was the right time for both us and them to be a part of the fellowship. The other thing that I'm looking to improve this year and beyond is a stronger feedback loop with which we can provide you individualized and personalized feedback on the application that you submitted. In years past, we just didn't have the staff capacity to do this. So if unfortunately you weren't chosen for the fellowship, we weren't able to give you really great insight into why that was. And so that may leave you hanging in the balance of understanding whether you should apply again or not. This year, I'm really hoping that it's different and that after you exit our process, whether it's because it's not a right fit at this time on your part or ours, that we have an understanding of why that was and a looking ahead into whether 2022 might be a better fit. Let's see. So on the note of character count suggestions, yeah, thank you for asking this question a couple of times. They're not a disqualifier. If you go over the character counts, it doesn't make your responses null and void. Rather, we encourage you to have the space in order to really fully flesh out your responses. That being said, encourage you to be concise and to the point. It's a value of Camelbacks to make it plain, as we might say. And so don't feel like you have to go above and beyond to have long drawn out responses. We probably look pretty favorably on the more brief and concise that you can be, but it's totally okay if you go over. We know that it adds an undue burden, stress, and anxiety to have to counting every last character and all of a sudden deleting thes and ands because you're trying to make it. Don't worry about doing that. We don't want to add that additional burden to you all. I have a question when it comes to the financial resources sections for schools, to the question, what makes your venture profitable and or financially sustainable? Yes, for schools, go ahead and talk about your per pupil allocations and then any other anticipations for fundraising considerations, whether you have successfully fundraised or potential donors that you would like to fundraise from in the future. Yeah, so to note about the priority deadline, I'm encouraging you all to apply by April 1st. Unfortunately, we can't get you feedback to resubmit by April 23rd. After you submit once, that is your final submission. But if you apply by then, you will hear back from us sooner with a decision about your status moving into the finalist round. Here's a question about, will we be penalized for having pilot data with few individuals? And if that's the case, should we perhaps focus less on the numbers and more on the impact to those students? Give me the impact and the numbers. Don't be concerned if you feel like you're starting small. We want to see folks that are both covering depth and breadth of those relationships. And so that comes at any scale, whether it's just a few tens of students or hundreds of students, thousands of students. So don't shy away from what the volume is, but more what the learnings and the lessons are. Oh, here's a great question. Are solo founders encouraged to apply even without a tech founder? So yes, definitely apply if you're a solo founder. Actually, to be a part of the fellowship, you can only send one representative. So it's not a fellowship completed by your team, but rather by just one person, because we think that our resources are really best suited to support a leader, and including their like personal development beyond just the venture development. Something to note about having a tech co-founder is that is a criteria that we look for the conscious tech folks, is because Camelback doesn't have rigorous technical expertise on our team or our coaching staff. It's something that we look for on your team. That being said, it is not a disqualifying factor if you don't have a co-founder with technical expertise. We just know that you're able to better leverage Camelback's resources that come more holistically around your business if you already have that expertise on your team. Oh, I see. Someone mentioned that there's still mention of the local economies track in New Orleans on our website. That is actually a track that we are phasing out and pivoting into different forms of support for our New Orleans ecosystem. So just for this year, we are hosting the conscious tech and the education tracks. And of course, that includes ventures that are in New Orleans as along with the rest of the country. Someone asked if it hurts candidacy to submit by the 23rd of April. No, it doesn't. Feel free to. Like I said, we anticipate anywhere between like 2 and 5 hours, depends on how detail oriented, how many revisions you and your team like to go through in order to submit the application. But if that time is better budgeted towards April or mid-April, that's all right. Take your time. We have a longer application window in order to hopefully fit what the timing that is right for you. We know that entrepreneurs have a lot on their plates at any given moment. And so we want to value your time as well. I see some folks are dropping off. Thank you so much for being with me. Appreciate your time. Like I said, I'm available to you all. Feel free to continue reaching out to me if I have not answered your question. I'm going to try to get through a couple more in the next couple of minutes, but this has been a joy and a pleasure. I can already tell that we're going to have a really strong applicant class. I just look forward to getting to know you all beyond these chats that are popping up here and your names, but more about your faces and your stories. So thanks for being with me for this hour. And with that, I'm going to continue to dive through these. Let's see. Okay, I see a specific question about whether a grassroots education program would fit into the education or conscious tech track. I'd say it really comes down to what the service delivery is through. If you're developing an app, like a technical app that will be live on the App Store for people to use, I'd say that fits kind of more squarely into our conscious tech definition. If that app is in the vein of the ed tech space to be used in the classroom, then I'd say apply to education. I don't know if that gave you more clarity. Let me know if you want to follow up with me about that. I see a question here about how many applicants do we anticipate? This year, I mean, as much as last year was uncertain, there's a lot of uncertainty this year as well. We have taken some more time off in between fellowship cycles than we traditionally have. And so we anticipate that causing a little bit of a boost in applicants. And so with that, we're anticipating a few hundred, between 300 and 400 applications this year. Although, who knows, when it comes down to that last week of April, I certainly anticipate a rush of applications. We may be underestimating. There's a question here about the terms of our convertible note, and I would love to follow up with you one-on-one on that. I can share more about that. I'm just not the best person to answer that question, and would love to give you more detail. So please go ahead and email me for that. What about general digital educational resources that could be used for after-school programs? I'd say at first pass, that fits to me more squarely into our education track. There was also a question up here about What is typically the hardest question for people to answer, and any tips with that question? Let's think. You know, we of the 4 video responses, 3 of them really just focus on your story and your qualities as a leader and a founder. And I really enjoy hearing those anecdotes shared by folks. But the first one is actually a pitch that just really is 3 minutes for you to tell us about you and your venture. And while that is somewhat of a basic and traditional ask that you as an entrepreneur may have to answer on a daily basis, I see folks still kind of struggle with that because I think that they want to engineer what the perfect answer is for Camelback. But as I've been saying, we really look for authenticity. We really look for understanding of your community, of the community that you're serving, and for all that to come through really saliently. So don't be afraid to share from the heart during that pitch. But we also want to hear you cover the core tenets of your business model as well. And I know that can be pretty tricky. That can be a lot to balance in 3 minutes. But overall, it's just like, again, an opportunity for you to connect with us in a way that isn't just in the written word. That could be a question that you have to record a couple of times, but it's one that I always look forward to reviewing. All right, I think that I've gotten to most of the questions. If you still have a burning question I haven't answered, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll turn my attention there and make sure I get to it. But if not, again, this has been a pleasure with you all. Appreciate the time that you've spent with me. Thank you so much. Look forward to getting to know more of you through the application process and hearing from you in my inbox. So yes, if you applied before, is it encouraged to definitely reuse your application. Like that's totally fine if you're copying and pasting certain things. We do want to hear though how you have grown over the past year. So highlight that. Totally fine if there's going to be some reproduction from years past, but also this is an opportunity for you to perhaps like shine in ways that you are making up for in the past year, especially the kind of year that we just had. We anticipate a lot of ventures who've applied before have probably undergone pretty significant pivots, and we want that to be shown in the application too. But don't worry if some of the answers are copy and pasted from years past. Let's see, and then I see another question about what track. I started an online for-profit selling culturally relevant gift items. Would that fall under conscious tech? If you're developing like a tool, an app, like something, a feature or an add-on, like something that can be packaged as a technological tool itself that assists in an online marketplace, then I would say that falls underneath conscious tech. We're looking for some kind of like I'm not going to be able to say the word. We're looking for you to like have ownership over some technical element and not simply like using tech as a means with which to sell your service. All right, any other questions? All right, well, it has been a pleasure. I wish everyone the best of luck. Like I said, looking forward to getting to know you all more. Thanks for joining me. Bye.